They betrayed you, lied, hurt you, and then came back as if nothing had happened. Smiling, asking how you've been, pretending to be innocent. They hope you forget, hope you stay silent, hope you keep enduring as if you're the one complicating things just because you still remember. But you remember not because you're petty. You remember because you have self-respect, because you understand something they refuse to acknowledge. When actions carry no consequences, people never learn. We live in a world where forgiveness is abused like a privilege. Many mistake your compassion for weakness, your silence for approval, and become accustomed to crossing lines without accountability. But according to Stoic philosophy, you are under no obligation to keep surrendering your peace for the sake of a toxic relationship. You have the right to say enough, not out of anger, but out of awareness. Awareness of your worth, and the conscious choice to honor what deserves your mind and your heart. So begin with a truth that may be hard to hear but is necessary. 1. They're not sorry. They're just sorry they got caught. Not everyone who apologizes feels remorse. And not everyone who admits their mistake intends to make it right. Some apologies are nothing more than clever tactics meant to diffuse tension, maintain a position in your life, or salvage their image not born from genuine awakening. The real danger isn't the initial wrongdoing, but the way they rehearse regret like an escape strategy, not as a moral reflex. And so, we're misled. We see them own up. We hear apologies that sound sincere. We notice their emotion and we begin to soften. But what we fail to see, or choose to ignore, is that they're apologizing not because they regret, but because they got caught. Pay close attention. Those who truly repent don't rush to be forgiven. They don't come at you with a list of excuses. They don't dodge discomfort or mask it with phrases like, "Don't hold grudges," "Everyone makes mistakes," or "I already said I'm sorry." People who genuinely want to make things right usually take a step back. They keep their distance. They sit with their discomfort. They endure the consequences. They don't demand you erase your memory or pretend nothing happened. Because they understand a mistake isn't just something to apologize for. It's something to take full responsibility for. On the other hand, those who apologize just to soothe you will grow irritated if you don't immediately accept it. They'll say you're too harsh, too sensitive, unable to let go. They shift the emotional burden onto you. And when you hesitate to forgive, they make you feel guilty as if you're the one clinging to the past, not them, the one who created it. The truth is, the moment an apology comes with the expectation of instant forgiveness, it's no longer remorse, it's manipulation. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The wise man doesn't speak much of change, he lets his actions prove it." And that's the clearest measure. After the apology, do they change? Do they show persistence in rebuilding from the ground up? Is there a withdrawal from old patterns, a break in the cycle of harm? Or does everything continue as before, only this time they're more careful not to get caught? To forgive too quickly someone who isn't ready to change is to place your hope in an illusion. You're giving a second chance, not to a real person ready to grow, but to an image they constructed with words. And when it repeats, you're no longer just the one hurt, you become the one allowing it to continue. Not because you're weak, but because you still hope. Not because you're naive, but because you're kind. But precisely because of that, their consequences must be visible so you can learn, too, how to honor your own boundaries. An apology is not an ending. It is only a beginning. And if nothing changes afterward, then that apology is worth no more than a justification wrapped in a soft voice. True remorse doesn't seek quick approval. It doesn't run from guilt. It doesn't demand, "Let's not talk about it anymore." True remorse accepts your silence, accepts the space you need, accepts the doubt you're entitled to, because a truly sorry person knows broken trust isn't rebuilt through words. It's rebuilt through time, behavior, and consistency. So the next time someone says they're sorry, step back. Don't listen to what they say. Watch what they do. Because words will never be stronger than behavior, especially from someone who once hurt you. There's a truth few dare to face. Each time you forgive without requiring any consequence, you're teaching them that their behavior is acceptable. You think you're doing something noble. You think it's grace, letting go, choosing peace, but in their eyes, your silence isn't kindness. It's an invitation to repeat what they did without fear of loss. Because last time, they got away with it. And next time, they'll be smarter, smoother, more discreet. Not because they're cruel, but because they've learned it works. Forgiveness is an internal act, but consequences are external responses. When you forgive yet continue to treat them the same, don't withdraw trust. Don't set new boundaries. You're giving away a piece of yourself without any terms to protect it. And what comes without a price won't be valued. What is too easily given will be easily abused. Kindness without boundaries is no longer virtue. It becomes self-erasure. Someone once told me she forgave a betrayal because she didn't want to lose the person. But after the first time came the second, then the third. And by the fourth, that person blamed her for always bringing up the past. The wound was no longer just from the original act, it came from the repetition, legalized by her silence. Not because she was weak, but because she was never taught that forgiveness isn't the same as erasing debt. And love cannot survive if one side has to pretend they never bled. In Stoic thought, Epictetus reminds us, if you don't redraw the boundary after it's crossed, you can't blame others for stepping over it again. This isn't heartless rigidity, it's responsibility to the self. A reminder that if you don't defend your own limits, no one is obligated to do it for you, and if you keep forgiving without requiring change, you don't just lose their respect, you begin to lose your own. We often think consequences are punishment, but they're not. Consequences are simply what follows a choice. If someone repeatedly chooses to hurt you, then the natural consequence is that closeness cannot continue. If they choose to lie, the consequence is you won't trust them like before. No need for rage, no need for hate. Just allow the consequence to unfold clearly, calmly, and without reversal. Forgiveness only matters when it doesn't mean erasing every trace. A person who truly wants to make things right will accept the change in how you see them, the caution you're allowed to keep, and the space you need to protect yourself. On the other hand, a person who demands forgiveness as if it's owed is the very one who doesn't deserve it. Because forgiveness is not a one-way street, it's a bridge. And if only one person is building it, while the other just waits with arms crossed, that's not remorse. That's manipulation. And you, the one reading this, must remember one thing. Consequences are not cruelty toward them. They are honesty toward yourself. 2. This isn't a mistake. It's a pattern. Have you ever forgiven someone because you thought it was just the first time? The first time they forgot your birthday. The first time they said something that left you speechless. The first time they vanished when you needed them. You told yourself that everyone slips up sometimes, that one instance isn't enough to judge someone. And you were right. Once isn't enough. But the problem is, it wasn't just once. When hurtful behavior repeats itself even in different forms, it stops being carelessness. It becomes a pattern, a model of behavior that the person inflicting it understands very well. Where your unspoken limits lie, which silences you'll choose, and the distance you're too afraid to create. They don't have to calculate like a master manipulator. They just observe. And they learn quickly. They learn you won't leave. They learn you'll keep justifying them. And they learn that you'll never set a consequence firm enough to make them stop. The issue isn't one thoughtless comment or a missed appointment. The issue is how they respond afterward. Do they take responsibility? Do they change? Are they clear-headed enough to realize how their actions affected you? Or do they just laugh it off, change the subject, or worse, make you feel ashamed for being hurt? That's when you need to step back and ask yourself, was this accidental, or are they simply used to me always letting it go? Stoic philosophy doesn't teach us to be suspicious of everyone, but it teaches us to distinguish between a sincere mistake and a repeated, intentional pattern. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When something happens repeatedly, don't ask why it keeps happening, ask why you keep allowing it." That question isn't about blame. It's about power. It gives you back the power to recognize that what you're enduring may not be misfortune, but the result of having stayed silent for too long. Think of the person who leaves you drained every time you see them. The one who always makes you question yourself. The one you're constantly defending. They didn't mean it. They're just stressed. They don't even realize. But if someone consistently makes you feel small, insecure, not enough, maybe it's not a temporary mood. Maybe it's an unconscious strategy where you're always losing and they always remain at the center. And then one day, when you finally stop, you see it clearly. This isn't the person you once admired. This is someone who got used to you always stepping back. Someone who's used to you putting your emotions second. And every time you accept that as part of love, you give them another reason not to change. So next time you feel uncertain, not about them, but about yourself, remember this. If harmful behavior repeats enough times, you no longer need an explanation from them. You need a promise to yourself that you deserve better. Not just once, but from this moment forward. No one walks into your life wearing a sign that says, "I will manipulate you." They arrive gently, warmly, even kindly. They come with closeness, with deep talks, with the feeling that you matter. And then one day, something small happens, a comment that stings but they don't notice, a disrespectful act brushed off with a smile. You feel uneasy, but don't want to overreact. You retreat, reassure yourself, maybe I'm overthinking, and just like that, you let it go. That first letting go feels harmless, but it begins a cycle that you'll later struggle to break. No one manipulates another overnight. They test. They gently tap the boundary you've drawn and wait for your response. And when you don't respond, when you smile, stay silent, they realize that boundary was drawn in sand. So next time, they go further. The words cut deeper. The absence stretches longer. The behavior grows colder. And you used to accommodating let it go again. The scariest part of a toxic relationship isn't the obvious harm. It's when you stop recognizing harm altogether. You live in a slow erosion where your emotions shrink, your intuition doubts itself, and things that should provoke a response get packaged under one phrase. It's probably nothing. But every time you say it's nothing, when it is something, you're clearing a path for them to enter deeper into your mental space. Stoicism doesn't ask you to be cold or suspicious. It asks you to be honest about what you feel and to respond with a clear mind. Epictetus said, "Suffering doesn't come from the events themselves, but from how we misjudge them." And in this case, the pain didn't start with their behavior. It started when we refused to call that behavior wrong. We called it minor. We said, "Just this once." And when it became a cycle, we were no longer alert enough to end it because we helped build it. Every cycle of manipulation begins with early ease, with silence mistaken for agreement, with kindness that lacked fences. But the morally grounded never fear boundaries. Only those who wish to use you react harshly when you begin to say no. And once you see that, you don't need to raise your voice or fight or make them understand. You just need to understand. You're no longer responsible for pretending things are okay, just to keep the relationship looking peaceful. The first time you let it go might be an accident, but the second, the third, the fourth, if you stay silent, becomes complicity in your own hurt. And you deserve better than that. You deserve a relationship that doesn't require you to shrink so someone else can stay comfortable. 3. Forgiveness without boundaries is a betrayal of the self. We grow up in a world where keeping the peace is often mistaken for maturity. From a young age, we're praised for being well-behaved. When we give in, encouraged to let things slide, taught that silence is wisdom and speaking up causes trouble. And so, very early on, we learn to suppress. We smile when we want to cry. We nod when our hearts are screaming no. We say, "It's fine," while every cell in us is hurting. But what few ever tell us is this: every time you choose silence over truth, you're not just trading away emotion, you're gradually losing pieces of yourself. You think you're doing the right thing, that biting your tongue, letting it go. Not reacting to a careless remark is the way to preserve harmony. But what you're really preserving isn't peace, it's a fragile mask draped over a growing unrest. And after many rounds of that, you begin to lose touch with yourself. You can't tell anymore what you truly feel and what you only say to make others comfortable. You start to live in two worlds, one of silent pain, and one of the cheerful facade you force yourself to maintain. That isn't maturity. It's self-betrayal dressed in pleasant manners. Stoic philosophy doesn't teach us to be angry or to resist everything. It teaches something more important, to honor the truth within. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If something feels wrong, don't call it right just because it pleases others." And emotion, while not always accurate, is a signal. If you feel hurt, it means a value within you has been crossed. If you feel choked up, a boundary has likely been violated. And if you stay silent long enough, you're no longer keeping peace, you're breaking your pact with self-respect. Each time you swallow your feelings to avoid conflict, you're rewriting your beliefs about your own worth. You're teaching yourself that your pain is less important than someone else's comfort. That your hurt doesn't deserve conversation. That you must adapt to insensitivity, carelessness, or worse, abuse disguised as just joking. True love doesn't ask you to disappear in order to hold on to it. A meaningful relationship doesn't require you to silence your inner voice, to maintain surface-level comfort. And kindness does not mean endless silence. You can be polite and still firm. You can be calm and still say, "That hurt me." You can be kind and still hold clear boundaries. Forgiveness is essential, but if it requires you to stay quiet about what you feel, then it's no longer forgiveness, it's self-abandonment. And you don't need to live like that just to be seen as easygoing. You deserve more than that. You've always deserved to be heard first and foremost by yourself. Forgiveness is a powerful act. But when it lacks clarity, no boundaries, no terms, no change, that noble gesture becomes fertile ground for disrespect to grow unchecked. The irony is, you think you're giving them a chance to change, when in truth, you're giving them a reason not to. Think back. Have you ever forgiven someone, hoping they'd recognize your sincerity, feel moved, awaken, and treat you better? Only to realize they weren't inspired, they saw an advantage. They began to cross lines more easily, more subtly, more confidently, because they knew there was no cost. One mistake followed another, but in the end, everything was wrapped up in a hug, a few gentle words, another moment where you told yourself, "Let it go this time." But the thing is, disrespect never begins with a brutal blow. It starts when they forget your birthday and you say nothing. When you quietly pay for dinner despite a promise made. When a late apology arrives without any intent to make it right. And then you forgive. You let it go. You don't want to make a big deal out of it, but that very ease sends a message. You'll always be this way. You won't stay angry. You won't walk away. You won't change anything. So they won't either. Because the system still works in their favor. Epictetus once said, "No one can insult you the same way twice if you've learned your lesson the first time." And the lesson isn't just internal insight. It's the external act of protecting the change. If you forgive someone but allow them to stay in the same position in your life with no distance, no boundaries, no adjustment, then that well-intentioned forgiveness still communicates this. Your kindness has no fence. Consequences are not punishment. They are the natural outcome of choices. If you hurt someone, you lose trust. If you lie, you lose the right to hear the whole truth. If you betray loyalty, you lose the special place you once held. No need for scolding, no need for grand statements. Sometimes, silence and distance are what help the other person realize. There are things a simple sorry can't fix. So if you choose to forgive, do it with an open heart but a clear mind. Forgiveness doesn't mean keeping everything the same. It may mean starting over, but not from the same place. Not placing consequences means creating a lawless space where kindness is exploited and decency is devalued. And you, by daring to respond differently, are the one redrawing the map of respect, both for yourself and for them. 4. Indulgence is not compassion. There's a strange paradox in love. The deeper we care, the more easily we forgive, the more we shield, the more we carry burdens on our own, hoping that if we shoulder enough for them, they'll lighten and change. But few ever tell you this. When you continually protect someone from the consequences of their actions, you're not healing them. You're feeding a dangerous illusion that they never need to change. I once saw a mother pay off her son's debts over and over. Every time he borrowed money, she found a way to cover it. Every time he lied, she apologized on his behalf. She called it maternal love, responsibility, a way to save her child from stumbling too soon. But she didn't see that by removing reality from his path, she was teaching him nothing about consequences. So the next time he failed, he did it with the confidence that Mom will handle it. This isn't limited to families. It happens in friendships, in love, in workplaces, in any relationship where one person keeps absorbing the consequences meant for another. You think you're helping them through a rough patch, but what you're really doing unknowingly is creating a false world where they can break trust, dodge responsibility, hurt others, and never have to adjust their behavior. And that false world doesn't help them grow, it makes them worse, because they no longer feel the need to be accountable. Stoic philosophy calls this misguided kindness, turning compassion into a shield for wrongdoing. Epictetus once said, "No one matures by being shielded. We grow by standing in the consequences we create." When you clear every obstacle from someone's path, you're not making their journey easier. You're robbing them of the chance to learn how to walk right. Love is not unlimited forgiveness. Love is not carrying all responsibility. Love is not shielding others from discomfort. In truth, real love sometimes requires firmness. I won't untangle this for you. I won't pay the price for you. But I'll be here when you're truly ready to change. That's not abandonment. It's an invitation for them to step out of false comfort and into reality, the only place true growth begins. So, if you believe you're helping, ask yourself, is what I'm doing giving them a chance to grow or helping them delay their growth? Because healing doesn't come from erasing consequences. It comes from letting someone rise from the ruins they created. And you, the one who loves, deserve to be a companion, not their substitute for life. There's a kind of love that begins gently but ends in exhaustion. It's not loud or dramatic, no shouting matches, no tearful exits. It's quieter, waking up each morning tired from carrying the emotional weight for two. It's always being the one to make peace, swallowing your tears to keep a relationship from falling apart. You sacrifice, endure, soothe until one day you realize you're no longer in love. You've become the rescuer of a ship. The other person never bothered to row. You think you're strong. You tell yourself that love is unconditional giving. You say, they're hurting, I need to be patient. But pain is no excuse for someone to drain you. And love doesn't mean bearing the entire relationship while the other only takes. A love without boundaries, where all mistakes are forgiven, all limits erased, will eventually turn you into a distorted version of yourself. Always strong because you're not allowed to be weak. Always kind because you fear being seen as cold. Always understanding because you're afraid of losing them. But who's understanding you? Stoicism teaches that a rational person loves with awareness, not blindness. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't call what's draining you love. Anything that strips away your freedom, your peace, or your dignity is not virtue. It's bondage painted in emotion." True love doesn't ask you to lose yourself to keep someone else. It doesn't demand silence when you're hurt. It doesn't force you to ignore your intuition just to stay. You cannot heal someone by helping them forget the consequences of their choices. You cannot love someone in a healthy way if you love them so much you forget you need love too. And when you keep giving without being nourished, you're no longer a supporter, you're a resource being depleted. Love, without mutual respect as its foundation, becomes a one-sided weight. And when you're the one always enduring just to keep the relationship going, you'll one day wake up in a life where your happiness is tethered to someone else's emotional weather. When they're sad, you suffer. When they're tired, you worry. When they're hurt, you feel guilty. And you? When you're in pain, who's on your side? Love without limits sounds beautiful, but in truth, every relationship needs boundaries. Because boundaries aren't signs of coldness, they're declarations that say, I can love you deeply and still love myself enough not to lose everything in the process. You deserve a relationship where gentleness doesn't come from silent sacrifice, but from two people walking toward each other, not one running endlessly in the other's direction. 5. Reclaiming your power is an act of peace. There's a common mistake many make when they're hurt. They focus all their energy on making the other person realize their mistake, change their behavior, or at least apologize the right way. But that's a battle with no end, because you're trying to control what cannot be controlled. Another person's thoughts and actions. And the more you try, the more powerless, tangled, and disconnected you become from yourself. Inner freedom begins the moment you stop trying to fix others and start changing how you respond. You can't force someone to love you properly, respect you properly, or treat you the way you hope to be treated. But you can always decide, will you stay in a relationship that makes you question your self-worth, or will you walk away with your dignity intact? Will you keep shrinking yourself to fill their silence, or will you embrace your silence to better hear your own voice? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When you see someone act wrongly, don't let them pull you away from yourself. Your reaction is where your true power lies." You don't need to retaliate. You don't need to explain at length. You don't need to make them understand why you're sad, hurt, or disappointed. Because some people understand but don't care. And others don't care, so they never try to understand. When you change your reaction, you reclaim initiative. Instead of getting pulled into someone else's emotional game, you step back calm, clear, and tell yourself, "I cannot control them, but I can control my choices, and I choose to walk away from what costs me my peace." That's not running away. It's the decision of someone who has realized that preserving mental peace is more important than holding on to a relationship built on endurance. Change doesn't come from anger or disappointment. It comes from realizing that you don't have to trade your self-respect just to be seen. You don't have to beg just to be kept. And you don't have to sacrifice yourself to maintain something that no longer feels safe. Because in the end, true power doesn't lie in whether they change, it lies in whether you're willing to change your role in the story. Something strange but profound happens within you when you truly start setting boundaries, when you no longer try to hold on to others at any cost, and when you stop living with the question, "Do they still approve of me?" At first, it scares you. You feel like a different person, quieter, explaining less, trying less to be perfect, and you wonder, am I becoming too cold? But no, you're not becoming hard. You're simply entering a state of calm, something all your past suffering never allowed you to reach. That calm isn't passive silence. It's the absence of inner chaos. It's waking up without anxiety, not checking your phone with a pounding heart, not guessing whether today they'll be distant again, moody again, using their emotions to destabilize you again. You no longer walk on eggshells every day. You're no longer held hostage by unpredictable reactions. You start to breathe with your own lungs. When you reclaim control of your life, you stop caring about pleasing everyone. You no longer act kindly out of fear of losing someone. You act kindly because that's who you are. You no longer say no out of anger. You say it because you've learned your limits. You don't walk away to hurt them. You walk away because you refuse to be hurt again. And you realize calm isn't a sign of indifference. It's the voice of someone who has walked through storms and decided not to let their mind be swept away again. Epictetus taught, "Freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. It is the ability not to be ruled by anything within." And the calm you feel doesn't come from the world changing. It comes from no longer denying the truth within. You accept that some people will never apologize. Some relationships will never heal. Some wounds will never be explained. And you no longer need them to be. Because you've chosen to keep your peace, not by changing the world, but by changing your place in it. Then, you no longer react to everything. You no longer need to prove anything. You no longer need others to see your worth, because you've seen it. And once you truly see that you deserve a life free from chaos, you'll understand that the greatest power lies not in defeating anyone, but in never again letting anyone pull you away from yourself. I used to do everything I could to hold on to relationships that no longer truly existed, simply because I feared the feeling of loss. I used to forgive quickly, let things slide in silence, suppress my emotions, and believed that was a sign of maturity. But the more pain I went through, the more I realized forgiveness is not a ticket for someone to return as if nothing happened. It is a closing door, so you can preserve the peace that lies behind it. You don't have to harbor hatred, nor do you need to become so hardened that you feel nothing, but you do need enough clarity to see that love, kindness, and compassion all require boundaries. Because if you don't protect your own self-respect, then every good thing you offer becomes just another condition for others to cross the line. Forgiveness is a choice, but consequences are inevitable. And sometimes, the clearest way you can love yourself is to say, I can forgive, but I won't return to where I was. And if today, something within you has awakened, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next content. Because sometimes, all it takes is one moment of realization to begin a deeper, quieter, and freer life. Live like someone who no longer needs permission to be at peace. See you in the next video.